by Charlie Rowley, former SPAD, to Michael Gove, and journalist and political commentator Jade Azim. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on a really dark day after those stabbings on the LNER train from Doncaster that happened, left Doncaster, didn't it, at 6:25, and then an hour later or so, the attack started, and many of the papers are covering that story. The Sunday Times reporting what we've been talking about on Sky News today, that 2 have been arrested over that stabbing spree, and an investigation, of course, has now been launched. Yeah, just a really dark day.
Yeah, I suppose no, we can go into speculation later, but obviously a lot of the recounts of the passenger stories coming off the trains are pretty horrendous, aren't they? You know, people shouting "I love you," hiding in toilets. It's a really, really horrific story to wake up to. And obviously, you know, that there will be questions later, but right now there's 10 people in hospital, 9 with life-threatening injuries.
And that's what it strikes at, Charlie, doesn't it? We were discussing in the break there that we all understand taking a journey on a Saturday night with friends, with family, and suddenly you're trapped on this train, and in what feels like an eternity, you can't escape. And the Sunday Telegraph really focusing in on the horror that people must have experienced last night.
You're absolutely right, and trapped is the right word. I mean, there is physically nowhere to go. You cannot run apart from through the carriages and through the train, as what some of the reports of what some people had to endure. And on a Saturday night, you know, you do these paper reviews and you talk about the news all the time, and there is so much bad news around. You used to think that the one weekend where people will be going out on a Saturday night, celebrating still Halloween, celebrating Guy Fawkes night, there would have been families on there. You know, anyone taking any kind of public transport to or from those kinds of events on a Saturday should be safe. They should be able to do that. And we've had to wake up this morning to a horrific and barbaric attack where we're left with very little detail about who the perpetrators are. 2 people have been arrested. I'm sure the police will, when they conclude their initial investigations, they will want to hand that information over to ministers to be able to tell the public a bit more about these individuals. But so far, it is just people waking up on a Sunday morning to another attack, it seems, in the UK that is currently inexplicable, where families will be absolutely scarred mentally, some obviously horrifically physically. We've got now 9 people with life-threatening injuries. So it is an awful story to wake up to. But credit always to the emergency services who did respond and responded in good time, according to all the reports that we've had so far. But the people on that train, people taking public transport today, will be worried. There will be a state of fear in this country about taking public transport, because you just don't know what might happen.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that about emergency services, actually. Universally praised for being on the scene, for securing the scene and making sure that people were able to leave the train and get home safely. Often in these situations, you have to look for the heroes, and the heroes being the police, the emergency services, and that's really key to that. We'll be covering this story throughout the day on Sky News, but what we're going to do now, we're going to move on to the budget. And this is being reported, it's the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. And obviously, Rachel Reeves has a black hole. We've known about that for quite some time. How she feels that, though, that black hole, is another story. And the Sunday Telegraph doubling down on potentially that council tax might be the key to solving this big problem.
Yes, budget speculation fully underway. So, yes, obviously the big monstrous 30 billion black hole that the OBR has forecast for public finances, which, forecasting is a bit of a seesaw, so it's quite difficult to predict. But obviously the government has to find some way to raise quite a significant amount of revenue, in part through, well, they want to talk about primarily tax rises. They have also talked about reforms to things like Motability, but those are just like cutting at the sides. So one of the big ideas that they've been talking about is reform to council tax. Now, council tax is an interesting one. We haven't had any reforms to council tax since the 1990s. I think the last re-evaluation was 1991. So in some ways, it's well overdue. But obviously, some people are going to be hit harder than others. So there is one IFS report that came out that the Chancellor listened to, which was about adding another band to the sort of top echelons of some households. But there was also another plan that suggests that she might increase it to 100% for the 2 highest existing council tax bands. That would bring in a lot, but obviously it raises a lot of questions about London and the South East, who's likely to be impacted most of all. And then the other one is, of course, that basic rate income tax as well. So there's a lot of levers here, a lot to pull, and none are particularly appealing.
No, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, it's not good, you know. This is a Chancellor that delivered her first budget last year and said, you know, she was going to raise taxes through national insurance contributions, but that was the only one that she was going to break, you know, in terms of the manifesto pledge. Now looks like she's going to come back again and ask for more money through rises in income tax. Again, something she said she wasn't going to do. So that's a sticky wicket for her. But on the council tax stuff, you know, you've got to look at who it might impact. And it may end up actually impacting pensioners who might have, you know, a lot of assets. They might be asset rich in terms of the property that they live in, but are ultimately cash poor. So asking them to pay more council tax will be hitting the pensioners and some of the most vulnerable at a time where, as I say, this time last year, she took away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. So
we all know how that ended.
Exactly. So a headache for the government, again, I think, on trying to find more ways to raise revenue. And of course, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about it in the next hour, but if you're talking about properties, you know, she's facing a bit of a sticky wicket on her own property front with her own renting out her family home. But, you know, we'll see how well that plays out.
But it's interesting, isn't it, more broadly with the budget? We often see this drip feed of ideas, a floating of what might go down well with the public. What's your sense on this one, Charlie? Whether the public will lap this up or, you know, kick it down the road?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think the income tax raise, I think, is probably, quite certain, because she needs to raise a lot of money, and that will raise a lot of money. So I think it's biting the bullet to say, I'm going to raise this money, it's going to go on things like the NHS, it's going to cut the debt that we can't keep putting on to the next generation. So, and things are worse than we feared. So there is a way of explaining it. It won't go down well, but I think that is the way to raise a lot of money. I think the other, the drip, as you say, about property taxes, whether it's council tax, whether it's inheritance tax, I think that is just testing the water, and it might allow HREEves to say, we've looked at this, but we've decided we're going to do something else to try and pull a rabbit out of that, or try to save some sort of good news.
The difficulty with this is that, you know, us wonks like to talk about the OBR and the black hole, apologies. But most people don't really understand what that means, right? So actually, it's more about where that goes. So if she talks about the NHS and she talks about public services,
we'll
it might be
leave
more
it there,
helpful.
Jade. Charlie, thanks for your company. Back after the break.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The war